All right, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I know this is probably your lunch hour or a late Friday afternoon if you're joining us from a different time zone. And we're thank you for taking the time to learn about how you can how you can power your kids' success through this summer. We're going to go over a few different topics today on what makes and how you can power your kids' math learning. This is less going to be about StarSpark. I'm happy to answer questions. So we'll go through some of the material. We have a lot of research material, so we'll also send out references at the end of the meeting for all of the things that we quote here. And we'll have questions. We'll make sure that there is time for questions at the end of the session. Okay. So, by way of introduction, um, I'm the founder of Starspark.ai. My co-founder Rohit is here on the call as well. We are very old friends. We know each other from middle school, so we have had a very long journey together, building StarSpark together. I have a fair amount of experience working in machine learning, specifically recommendation systems, natural language processing at a variety of different firms like Google, Amazon, Twitter. Rohit has worked at Meta, Microsoft, TI, and a bunch of other firms. So we are also parents. I think that's the main thing here because we have faced a fair amount of frustration in developing math skills for our own children. So StarSpark was born from partly our own frustrations as parents and how we can help our students and our kids get better at math, but also a realization from an AI standpoint that the way AI applications are developing, we can actually build a pretty capable math tutor for our kids. So that's where we started. Folks are free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you're interested, and we can continue our discussion there. So before we start, I'm gonna quickly get a poll going for students. So just let us know which grades your students will be going into in the fall. If you have more than one student, please feel free to select more than one option. Okay, so a few more people, please quickly get your votes in. Okay, last call for votes before we move on. Okay. So we have a number of students from the elementary school, a few middle, and a few more on high. That's great because we will have specific tips and techniques and things for all of these different school grade levels. Thank you very much for participating. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover a few different topics. The idea of skill versus muscle. I don't know if folks are familiar with this idea that there is a distinction between skill and muscle, and there are different ways that you develop both. As we have a good mix of people between elementary, middle, and high school, there are certain challenges that happen when kids transition from one to the other. And sometimes those transitions can be lost because we have students who are doing math advancement. So even though technically they might be in elementary or middle, or they might be taking a course that's from a higher grade level. So sometimes it's not really clear what those transitions mean, and sometimes they can be hard for students. So we'll cover a little bit about that and what you can do. We're going to give you some specific tips on how to help the students do better. We're going to talk a little bit about the summer slide. A hint for you, the summer slide is not a physical slide that you slide down. It's more of a mental slide, and we're going to talk about what happens over the summer and what can you do there. And then we will end with the idea of productive struggle. It's one of the very, very important concepts in learning theory and cognitive psychology that's going on how do we build better retention, how do we build more self-reliance and self-regulation executive functions on math. And we will definitely have space for some questions. So hopefully that sounds good to people. Let's get started with some of the material here. So let's start with the first concept, which is math. Is it a muscle or a skill? So let me try to get some of you folks to maybe type in the chat box of the fundamental question is, what is the difference between skill and muscle? What do you folks think about what the difference is? So feel free to put in your responses in the chat boxes and just hit send. Love to hear your responses. And if you are shy of answering in a group like this, then then imagine this is what your kids go through. And when you ask them to, hey, you should raise your hand and answer in class, they probably face the same kind of stresses as you are thinking about this. Right? Okay, so we have some answers coming in. People are thinking math is more for skill or muscle. Okay. Okay, Rachel, pretty nice. Yeah, you'd say it's a muscle. Nice explanation there. Manda thinks it's a muscle. Yeah, and Vesha, thank you. Anurag, Richa, great, great, great. So some interesting viewpoints that are being shared. Thank you so much for sharing. The distinction between skill and muscle is, let's talk a little bit about skill. So hopefully a lot of you can swim or ride a bike. These are things that are skills that once you acquire, they don't actually decay with time. So when you've acquired a skill, it relatively remains roughly at the same level for very, very long periods of time. Muscles, on the other hand, require acquisition and effort to acquire, but they also require a consecutive set of effort to maintain. So there has been a fair amount of discussion on whether math is a skill or is math a muscle. And we are of the opinion that math is actually a muscle more than a skill. It can be acquired, but you need to continually work on keeping your muscles strong. Just like if you were to go to a gym, if you stop going to the gym, the gains that you have decline. So there are three very important aspects of muscles. First is you need to train, right? So for math, you need to train your brain to think in different ways. Some of it is non-obvious, not non-simple, and you see all of these math puzzles that are posted on social media. And the reason why those math puzzles are popular is because they tickle your brain and make you think in a slightly different way than normal. There is a certain amount of abstract thinking or higher order thinking that math requires. So you need to acquire the practice and the ways of thinking in doing this training. So you need to maintain your training, and you need to get regular exercise so that you can actually sharpen and build speed in there. The second interesting thing about muscle is it's cumulative. And what I mean by cumulative is over time, the skills or the specific concepts that you are building in math, they are dependent on each other. For example, if you can't do addition, you can't do multiplication because multiplication builds on top of addition. Similarly, subtraction and division. So you need to know subtraction before you can do division efficiently. So you have to if some of your underlying skills devolve, then acquisition of new concepts becomes increasingly harder. So that is why it is very important to consider math more as a muscle than a skill. You might be great at math, and we're going to talk a little bit about the school transitions and how sometimes somebody who's great at math in elementary starts to struggle in middle school, or somebody who's great at math in middle school finds high school very challenging because a different set of concepts and capabilities need to be developed cumulatively. And the last part about muscle is that it decays if you don't use it, right? And this is where the summer is a very important time. And in summer, it is possible for you to actually devolve your skills. And there are studies that we are going to show about what happens over the summer for students who are working on math and what happens to even language over the summer. So as we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll again, just to understand what are folks' um, primary goals for their students over the summer. So please take a couple of minutes and respond to these questions. Okay. So some folks want to prepare for the next grade. Some folks want to make sure that they maintain their current skills. Okay, all right. I mean, that's kind of a leading question because the seminar is focused on the summer slide. So I think we might be putting words in people's mouths by or biasing people into there. Okay. Yeah, fun is a very important part. So fun is definitely important over the summer. It is a place, it is a time for students to recharge and relax and understand. Yeah, it's great. Okay, all right. Last call for poll numbers. Last chance to get you in. 5 more seconds. Okay. Okay, thank you. That's great. I think a large number of you have mentioned that you want to prepare for the next year and prevent the summer slide. So that's actually very, very important for your students to do this. I'm just going to quickly share the results with everybody as we move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about school transitions because some of your students, as you've mentioned, have gone into or are maybe switching from one year to the other over the summer. So we are going to talk a little bit about what happens between elementary to middle school, and because of math advancement, I think sometimes this switch or this change is not very obvious to folks. So you should think of not just physical school movement. There is obviously the physical school that you're actually moving from an elementary school and going to a middle school, but you should also consider that there may be changes happening based on just their math levels that they are doing. So the expectations have changed, even though the environment around them hasn't really changed further. So what happens from elementary to middle in math is that we are moving from concrete arithmetic to more abstract concepts, right? So in concrete arithmetic, you have questions like, I have 6 apples, I gave 3 to Sarah, how many apples do I have left? So it's very concrete. They know what an apple is, they know that there are people called Sarah, and they can physically imagine these objects going from one place to the other. Now you're talking about area. What is a square? So what is the area of this square? So that's a slightly more abstract concept. Or what's a circle and how do I find the area of a circle? Or more complicated word problems that would require a couple of steps to solve. Algebra or pre-algebra starts getting introduced. The idea of X, which is has been made fun of so many times, where people put X on a treasure map and say, hey, why do you always use X? Like my son asked me, like, why do they always put X? Why can it not be some other letter? And some people think literally that X is the only thing that can go in there. But like really, we are missing the point that it is an abstract concept where you are now starting to develop symbolic reasoning, where you are reasoning with symbols as opposed to numbers. And the idea that X could be any number is hard for a lot of students to grasp. There is an increased emphasis on problem solving. So rather than doing simple calculations, add this, add that, do this, which is what they are used to with their following PEMDAS or distributive associative properties, stuff that they learn in elementary school. But in middle school, they are doing more advanced manipulations. And then from a school environment perspective, generally they are adapting to multiple teachers as opposed to having one homeroom teacher that will teach all of these subjects for them. On the softer side of things, it requires a lot more organization and study habits. That is something that I find a lot of students struggle with because they have multiple subjects. It's not one class. They get different handouts from teachers. They have to maintain multiple notebooks. How do they organize? Like I need, let's say, a scale or a ruler and maybe some other equipment for math, but for science, I need something else. So they're going through all these changes where the summary of the types of things that the students are going to learn or need to be more hands-on with are around dealing with abstract mathematics, symbolic mathematics, and then organization. So just make sure that you think about these ideas as you work with your children. And this is a continuum, even though it looks like a step function that's suddenly going from one to the other, but you will see some of these skills develop. So if you're looking at some core things, like very few things that you want to work with your kids over the summer, focus on these aspects of like abstract mathematics, shapes, and things to do with these shapes. You can make it more concrete by having them cut out pieces of paper, draw these shapes, cut them out, get some feeling around those. How do they work with the symbolic nature of things? Work about, okay, how you can start with question marks instead of x's and say, let's say I have 7 apples and I remove some number of apples, I'm left with 3, how many did I take away? So that's a simpler way of introducing some of the symbolic aspects of reasoning. From middle to high, um, the biggest challenge that I see with kids is up to middle school to a certain level extent, the smart kids can actually do a lot of mental math. They can figure out many of these and they're really good at it. They have automaticity, so they can perform computations in their head. Unfortunately, as soon as you get into high school, and by high school, specifically what I mean is when they're taking math courses like Algebra 1 or Geometry, Algebra 2, IM 1, IM 2, if you follow the IM integrated mathematics curriculum, is that now problems need a fair amount of manipulation. So let's say that you are trying to solve an algebraic equation. You need to move terms from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. You need to collect like terms. You need to add them up. So there are a few different steps that are involved. And there's a lot of research on the difference between working memory and long-term memory. So working memory, if I don't know if folks have heard about this, the working memory generally can hold 6 items in your working memory at a time. So that's why like remembering 6 different numbers is easy or feasible, but when you get to remembering 8 numbers or 9 numbers, that becomes harder to remember. And there's a lot of research around that. So once you have a term or an algebraic equation that has a number of these terms, the students are still used to trying to do everything in their head. And then what you see is you see them make a lot of silly mistakes. So as a parent, that can be quite frustrating. And you're like, oh, my son or my daughter was so good at doing math earlier, and I don't know why they're struggling with this, or why do they make so many mistakes? Because this should be really simple. And once you work it out with them, they are able to solve it very nicely. But then when they get back into class, you see the same behavior. So what is actually happening here is that our observation is that the kids who are a little bit ahead in middle school actually struggle a little more because they overestimated their capability. So if you think about what we talked a little bit earlier, between skill and muscle, in muscle we said it is cumulative and it has interdependent concepts. And then you need to acquire new capabilities as you develop your skill, that is, you develop your muscles further. So it now requires new methods for students to learn. And this can be challenging for students because what has worked with them so far does not work anymore. So they can be a little confused saying, hey, I used to do so well because I used to be able to do all of these things. But now I cannot do them, and I don't know what's wrong. I don't know how do I do better. So just be cognizant and aware of some of these things. As they're getting to the higher grade levels, being more methodical helps. Writing out steps helps, and this is another set of capabilities that your students need to develop. So if you have to work on something with them over the summer, work with them on taking simple math problems, and then even though they're trivial and maybe they can compute it in their heads, but just having them write it out and do the steps on a piece of paper or something like that, because you are trying to build the capability and the muscle of decomposing the problem into steps. Even though they might be like, yeah, I can do it in my head, mom. That's okay. I know you can do it in your head, but I want you to just do this because you are trying to develop better work habits. Because what's going to happen is higher order thinking, when they get to like geometry, proofs, and things like that, they do require a number of different concepts to be used. And these concepts need to be applied in a certain order for you to work out a problem, right? And doing these, making sure that you are able to get them to focus on these, that is very important, right? And Priyanka, I note your question. We can come back to this at the end of the seminar when we have time for questions, and I'd be happy to help out and work on some things there. So, so there are some tips that we'd like to share with you for all the parents as they move through the transition. First, open communication, right? Talk about fears, talk about expectations. A lot of these students that I talk to have very high expectations from their parents, and I think they care more about what their parents think of them than about their own abilities in math. So they want to look very good. They want to make sure that they're appreciated, and they don't want to look stupid either in front of their peers or for their parents. So having an open conversation really, really helps, and making sure that they know that you are there for them, you are supporting them. The next step that you can do is encourage independence. And we're going to talk a little bit about productive struggle. So let them work through it. I think something that I'll harp on a few times is sometimes it's very hard for parents to see their kids struggle with something. So we have this urge of like, okay, I really want to help my child here, and why are they struggling? And that's going to be your challenge as a parent to work through and say, okay, I'm going to let them struggle for a little bit. So we're going to talk about productive versus unproductive struggle. Organization is great. Like, how do you set up planners, dedicated study spaces? There is a fair amount of neuroscience and cognitive science research that if you have a dedicated study space, it helps create these separations in the student's mind, and they end up being more focused. This became very poignant during the COVID time. A lot of people who struggled with working remotely did not have a separation between their workspace and their home space, because earlier the workspace was the office and home space was where you just had fun. And now it is very hard, because if you are sleeping on the same bed where you're working on your computer, it muddles up your brain. So there is a lot of recommendations saying, hey, create a dedicated space. Maybe it's just a table, maybe it's a chair, but then you only use it for work, not for play. And that helps you to create these bridges in your mind that you're switching from one to the other, and it helps remind context. Uh, if you've noticed, sports people, they sometimes listen to a specific song and they have these headphones on before going for a game. They have a routine, like they'll have a red colored towel that they're going to put in their pants, or they'll have a specific sock that they will put on. And these are ways that they are actually getting mentally ready to play. This is their equivalent of dedicated study space. So this doesn't have to be very complex. It could be a specific chair, a spot in the house, a device they only use for studying but not for play, an account that you can set up which is separate from their play account. So there are some techniques that you can set up. And then routine is very interesting, that you can set up a little bit of routine over the summer for them, because that'll help them when they get back into school. Summer can be a free for all. It can be a little bit hard to enforce any kind of routine, but just making some routine is helpful. When the school starts, think about like visiting schools, do the orientation walkthroughs. The reason why that helps is that students will open up more to you when you are able to visualize their school and say, when the student comes back and say, I had to walk so much long from class A to class B, and then I got late, and the teacher was really upset with me, and I got lost, and things like that happen, right? One thing that we have done as parents is when the orientation happens, we try to walk in the school carrying our child's school bag, just to get an idea of what it is that they're going through. It's a very simple technique. Just walk through a few of those classes and say, okay, do I have 5 minutes to get from here to there with my long legs compared to my sixth or my seventh grader? Things like that help. Focus on social emotional well-being. I think friendships are very important. So play dates, working with friends, because yes, there is a fair amount of stress from expectations and other things, especially moving to a new school. If you're transitioning from one school to the other, there is apprehension, new teachers. One funny thing that happens for elementary to middle is in an elementary, a grade 5 student is at the top of the food chain, right? They are the big guy who's or the big gal, and everybody is shorter, smaller, younger than them. Now, as soon as they move into middle school, they're at the bottom of the food chain. They are the person who gets picked on because everybody else is bigger than them. And there's new students that get mixed in, right? So having friendships allow you to manage this stress, have a shared experience with all of these students. And lastly, manage your own expectations, right? Um, be supportive, take a deep breath. It's okay. They will do fine. So don't worry about it. All kids work fine, but what they are, because they are looking at you most of the time as their guidepost on whether they're doing okay. Seeing you a little relaxed and supportive makes a huge difference for these students. So we're going to talk a little bit about the summer slide. Yes, this is an AI generated video. I thought it was cute. So I put that in. The summer slide is, there is a tendency for students to lose academic gains they've made throughout the school year over the summer break. And the studies are pretty stark. We see about 25-30% of the school year math gains evaporate over the summer. And up to 2 months of reading proficiency also disappears. You might have observed that students feel like they're starting over each fall, right? If they then the first few weeks of school is often spent by teachers in introducing or reviewing old material, then introducing new concepts. So the reason why teachers are forced to do that is because they want to make sure everybody starts on the same page. It does take away time from teaching new concepts, etc. So your students can actually get ahead if they can arrest some of this summer slide over the summer. And what are some ways that you can actually do? So we want to be very practical in tips that you can use in doing this. Reading is great, right? So establish, when we talked about routines, you can say you need to read 10 minutes every day or n number of pages every day or books. Take them to the library. Libraries are great way they can discover new books and do things. Many of them have like read aloud sessions, or look for your local library. Book logs are great. So one thing that we really enjoyed doing with our kids was is creating a book log, and then said you got to note down every day how many pages you read of which book, and then we set some prizes for them at the end of the summer. And kids are cute, right? Like if you promise them an ice cream, that's like the world to them. So it doesn't have to be something like magnificent. Though some kids would want you to buy them a Nintendo Switch too because it just came out. But depends on the type of challenge that you set up for them. The second area that is very easy for folks to do is math in daily life, right? So the reason we learn math is that it is very useful on a day-to-day basis. And remember, we talked about the difference between elementary and middle being math being more abstract. So math in daily life helps to ground math back from the abstract nature into real life. So if you are doing cooking, think about fractions, right? So have them measure out half recipes and say, let's do some baking, let's make some cookies, but I have a recipe that requires 6 eggs, but I want to make only half of the recipe. What should I do? Giving them conversion. So simple things like that actually help. Shopping and budgets are also a very interesting thing. One thing that we have tried doing is, hey, let's say what you want to buy and how much does it cost? Can you do some research? The idea of taxes are very funny to kids. They're like, why do we have taxes? I think a lot of adults also wonder why we have taxes. But this just help them compute. Okay, like say that you are going to save $10 to buy something, but did you factor in a 7.5% tax? And what does that do? And what are you trying to budget? If you're doing budgeting, saying, okay, I have $100 to spend, how would I actually spend $100 in a week? Give them these fun exercises and let them like do the research and figure out what products can they buy. By giving them a budget, it's a very fun way because it's going to exercise all of their addition, multiplication, some of those skills. If you're traveling, if you're taking road trips, or if you're just traveling anywhere, you can convert that into a learning opportunity. What distance are we going? Can I read an airplane ticket? Does it show me how many miles am I going to travel? How much time is it going to take us? Can I calculate the average speed of my aircraft as a consequence? Or if I'm going from on a road trip, how much time should I budget? I have to cover these many miles. How fast do you think we can go every time? And then maybe every time they ask you to stop for a washroom break on your road trip, they're like, hey, it's adding to our time. So there are these small, simple things that you can bring math into your daily life and have these conversations with your kids. Do some structured learning time. I think the idea here is consistency over intensity. So rather than having like a big session where they cover a lot of material or 2 hours or something, the idea is to be consistent. So this is the number one advice people give to folks who want to be more healthy and exercise is be consistent. Even if you show up for 10 minutes on the gym every day, show up for 10 minutes, right? So the idea of consistency feeds back into the routine and say, okay, I'm going to do this every week and I'm going to show up. That builds resilience and persistence. You can also use worksheets, or you can go on to StarSpark, and I'm happy to talk about to folks on how StarSpark can help you create some of these routines around structured learning and get your kids ahead. And lastly, let's not forget that it has to be a little bit fun. I mean, this is a time for kids to recharge. My biggest sadness when I graduated from college is I'm not going to get summer vacations anymore. I'm still sad about that, even though it's been 30 years or so. But that it is something that they want to do. It's low pressure activities are great. We have a few card games and board game suggestions. I don't know if folks play games with their kids, but there is a very nice card game called Set. It is for identifying patterns. It's all visual, and then it's a very fast-paced game, but it can be quite difficult. I find myself quite challenged with Set. It's a pretty cheap game. You can find it like a set of set cards for about like few bucks. Uno is great, calculating, computing, reversal, things like that. There are board games that have strategy and math in them. Monopoly, of course, it has a good old school game that helps you deal with money, addition. Generally, in our household, the youngest player becomes the banker. That is by design because we want them to compute all of the money. When somebody gives the money, how much do I need to turn it back? So there are simple learning opportunities in Monopoly. Catan is a great game. We love Catan. There's a lot of strategy and thinking involved in playing some of these games. And so see what works for you. These are just some simple suggestions on what can be done. Now, let's talk about the last topic for today, which is the idea of productive struggle. And the productive struggle, I mean, is the key to deep learning. And this is not the deep learning in an AI sense of the word. This is deep learning in the human sense of the word. The deep learning idea is that you have to build resiliency, you have to build mastery, you have to build retention. And that's what it means to have a deep learning. So what is productive struggle? The productive struggle is the process of working through a challenging task, wrestling with different ideas, trying out different things, and making mistakes, and then going back, recognizing that they made a mistake, going back into there, and then trying to change or adopt the approach to say, hey, okay, I may looks like I got misled on step 3. I'll go back with it. This is not about frustration. This is about persistence. And there are two extremes that you can go in. And this is why idea of productive struggle is hard to implement sometimes in practice. There can be unproductive struggle. Unproductive struggle is you get a math question, You are trying to solve it, you have no idea, you feel stuck, it's not going anywhere, and you give up. And when you give up, it becomes harder and harder to get you back on to doing something like this. On the other hand, you have very simple math problems. I mean, we have a number of kids who report a lot of frustration with things like Kumon, where there's no real learning. It's the same repetition of the questions again and again. Their tasks are fairly easy after the first time for the kids. So it's really no struggle for them. There's no real learning that is actually happening as a consequence of this. So think about the balance in, and somewhere in between these two extremes is productive struggle, right? So how do you actually foster some of these productive struggle topics, and what can you do to help your students there? So before I go into some giving you some tips, this idea of productive struggle is very important. So think about this idea, and we'll share some research at the end of the webinar, and we'll email this out as well, so you can read up some of the papers on it. It is shown to develop a deeper understanding and conceptual mastery. So let's say that you are trying to figure out a fraction problem and you're trying out different things. So let me give you an example of a math problem. Example of a math problem could be, let's say that I have two numbers and I raise one number to the power of the other, and both need to be single digit numbers, but the answer needs to be 64, right? So this is an example of something that will be hard for normally for folks to do. So let's say are you guys able to see what I'm drawing? Yeah, so nods. Okay. So let us say this is the math problem I give you, right? So this is a simple math problem about exponents. Now, there are many answers to this math problem. There are three answers, but it is not trivial or not easy for you to immediately figure out what to do. The way most kids would go about solving this is they're going to try and solve one question, and they're like, okay, I'm done. And then you're like, hey, but there are other options. So what they will do is they will evaluate a whole set of exponents in doing this one math problem. So they develop an understanding of what, when something is raised to another power, what are the various answers I can get? And how do I move back and forth? Like if I make this a power of that, does 2 to the power 4, is 2 to the power 4 bigger, or is 4 to the power 2 bigger? Like that's not an obvious answer for many kids. Can I actually can I get that going? So what I would love for all of you is to solve this problem and give me all the answers, because let's face it, we are talking about math. So this webinar would not be complete if I didn't make you guys do some math. You can put your answers in chat. Thank you, Anu. Nobody? Come on, it's not that hard problem. So we are looking for two numbers that and they both need to be single digit numbers that give 64. Yep. A to the power 2, yep. There is more than one answer is the trick to this question. And the reason I like this question is that our kids are so used to jumping to an answer, they never consider that things in math can have more than one right answer. A lot of their life, they've been taught that for every question, there is one right answer, right? So here we have more than one right answer, right? Okay, we have a bunch of different answers. Yeah. Abha has an interesting take. I know Abha has a high schooler, so she's doing negative numbers to the power. That's right. Yeah. Okay, all right. So most of you got the right answer. I think Amanda beat everybody. She did she was the first person almost there. There's a couple of things there, but two of those answers were correct. This is the idea about how, so you just experienced a little bit of the productive struggle yourself. So getting to the first answer was probably easy for most folks. Getting to the second and the third answers probably took a little more effort in getting to the answer, but it was not an unapproachable problem. You had the ideas, you had the concepts. It was just framed in a way that fosters productive struggle. So the advantage of productive struggle is that it builds resilience, perseverance, and grit because you have to go through it a little bit more. And it's like a little bit like you feel that it's approachable. That is why it's productive. If you feel that it's completely out of your realm, it will become unproductive, right? So that's the trick in creating these types of questions. It helps enhance your problem solving, and it's shown to increase long-term retention for students. So the goal for any kind of learning program is long-term retention, because we do want these students to not only acquire the knowledge today, but actually remember it for a while. Because remember, math is a set of interdependent concepts. So we're going back to the concept of cumulative and interdependent concepts in math, as um, when we discussed muscle, the idea of a muscle, right? So I'm just gonna erase all of this. Okay, all right. Uh, there is some amount of self-regulation that is also developing. So we do want, as kids grow older, we want them to develop this idea of self-regulation, this idea of persistence and perseverance. And I need to keep going. I need to keep moving on, even though I am struggling with this. That leads to a growth mindset. And I'm sure most people are familiar with the Stanford work on growth mindset. In general, people with growth mindset perform better than people with skills when they start out. So even if you have a person that doesn't have the skill or the knowledge or the conceptual understanding on day one, in a certain period of time, people with growth mindset will outperform the people who started with that with the right knowledge at the same starting point. So we do want the kids to develop growth mindset. So this is why this is very important. Um, so what can you do as a parent? Um, As I said before, it's very hard for most parents to see their kids struggle. And I think you'll have to spend a little bit of effort to check yourself and not to jump in too quickly. Resist the urge. And one challenge that I think a lot of people are going to face is not use solvers like ChatGPT. And there is studies that actually show that students that use ChatGPT actually had worse academic performance, because they are not really learning how to solve and be solving themselves. So I get it. The allure is strong. I have a piece of homework. I just want to get it done. But let's face it, it doesn't lead to good learning experiences, because ultimately you are going to give a test at some point in time, and you're not going to have ChatGPT next to you. And I'm not even counting all the math mistakes ChatGPT does. If you see the child having a little bit of a productive struggle, how can you help them, right? So this is why Socratic methods, even though they came from way back, are very useful. Ask some of these leading questions, right? What have you tried so far? Maybe is there something else you could have tried? What is the knowledge that you have? What do you know about this area? Do you know some formulas? Do you know some techniques? Let's say you're doing quadratic equations and you're doing factoring quadratic equations. So do you know different methods? Do you know the quadratic formula? Do you know completing the square? Do you know the X method? Do you know GCD or GCF? How do you find LCMs and GCFs? Do you know associative distributive properties? So this will actually, now you can see, right, how in just one question of quadratic equation factoring, we went over so many of the concepts that are underlying this, and then just open-ended recall is known to show very high long-term retention. Visual thinkers, a lot of kids are visual thinkers. Can you draw it? It's very important because I think there are also studies that show that when you use fine motor skills, you end up doing leading to much longer retention. So a longer topic, maybe we'll have a webinar on what leads to long-term retention and how does our brain work on learning theory. If folks are interested, you can give us some feedback at the end. If you are interested, I'm happy to do another seminar and just like, okay, how do you actually build long-term retention? Normalizing mistakes are very important. I think this is one place that I was not very good as a parent, is that get pretty upset very quickly on like, okay, why did you make this mistake? But I think the idea is that you learn only when you make a mistake, right? If you don't make a mistake, there's no learning objective achieved. You already know the material. So the act of learning is the act of making mistakes. Obviously, it is important not to repeat the mistakes, but that comes with practice, right? um, Praise effort, not just the outcome. I think this is a very important aspect. Is if you think about top performing sports teams, they always talk about process. They don't talk about as much about the outcome. Even if they lost the game or if they won the game, they're going to be talking about the process, and they made these plays and these plays worked and these plays did not work, and they're going to go back and then they're going to revise. So if you think about the top elite athletes thinking, they are thinking about process. They're not as much thinking about outcome, right? Now, if you get into good process, you will get outcomes eventually, right? So it is making sure that you talk about them, provide tools, not answers, and then create a safe environment. I think one thing that parents feel the pressure to do is to make up answers. It's not just large language models that hallucinate. I think we also make up answers because we don't want to appear weak in front of our kids sometimes. They're like, okay, dad knows everything or mom knows everything. How can I say I don't know something? But once you say, I don't know something, let me look it up, it shows that you have a growth mindset, and it allows your student to feel, oh, okay, I can also say sometimes that I don't know everything, and I need to get some of this information out, right? So I'll actually just stop here. We do have some of these ideas built into our product for StarSpark. For students, we actually are very, very focused on getting them to practice. And productive struggle, slowly increasing the level of complexity of the work they do. We track their mistakes. We don't make math mistakes like ChatGPT. We are very handwriting focused and so on and so forth. I'll just stay on this slide for a few seconds and take questions. We are happy to, if you would like to book a consultation with me or Rohit, there is a QR code. You can scan it, book a 30-minute call. I am happy to show you how our product works and how it does. But this is less about me trying to sell you a product, more about me trying to give you skills and things that you can use on your daily life over the summer with your children. So I'll open the floor to questions at this point. You can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah. Hi, Ashish, Priyank. You
Hi,
did,
Priyanka.
yeah, nice presentation. Thank you for doing this. Um, some of the things we learned is pretty useful here. You did alluded to this habit of laziness. They just want to do mental math.
Mhm.
I know it is totally out of laziness, and it's very hard to motivate him to put it on the paper. He does make mistakes because of that.
Hmm.
But when he does it on paper, he corrects it.
Hmm.
Uh, what would you suggest for a second grader, third grader? How can we motivate them to become more develop habit to write on the paper?
Yeah. It is a tough challenge in this era. Students have this problem of not wanting to write, and we face this all the time. There are two or three things that I will suggest, Priyank. The first thing that I would suggest is number facts are important. So there is a certain amount of memorization that is very useful in math. And at this level, when you are in grade two and three, doubles facts, number facts, and times tables, you should try and work on those with your child, and you'll see some of those errors go away with them because they are still doing some of those problems. And then the second thing that we try to do with our product, and I'm happy to talk to you about it a little, is have kids speak it out, explain how they solved it. So we find that kids don't like to, like, sometimes writing or something can be a little bit difficult, but talking it out helps build this, gets the same outcomes at times as doing it on paper for younger kids. For older kids, it's slightly different, but your kids are younger. So if you can get them to explain and just talk out step by step, just walk me through your calculation, you will see some of the self-correction starting to happen when they talk. What happens for younger kids is the way our brains work is when we are born, almost every center of our brain is connected to every other center. And over time, we develop certain connections and certain other connections devolve. So when younger kids are working on it, so many centers of their brain are firing at the same time that keeping track of some of these things becomes harder when they're just thinking about it in their heads. By forcing them to speak out their things, it forces them to be organized in their thinking. So that could be a technique that you could try out.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. One more specific thing that I'll give for younger kids is do more open-ended problems. So a lot of people do problems that are, let me actually just use my pen to write out some problems here. So let's say that I'm trying to do 2 plus 8, right? Let's say I'm adding to 10, right? So maybe I'm doing this problem, and what I'm trying to get them to do is maybe I didn't give this, and I'm just saying what, right? Okay. Now convert this problem into, so this is what I call a left to right problem, right? And this is the most common math problem that you get. Now convert this into a right to left problem. Now these problems have multiple solutions, suddenly, because the equation can be true in many ways. And say, can you give me two numbers? How many different ways can you make 10? And once you start giving them these problems, very soon you will realize that they will themselves come to the conclusion that they gotta write a few of these out, because they are not going to be able to remember all of the combinations that make up 10, right? Does that help as an example of what you could do?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to change the type of math problem. What we do is we don't change the math problem. It's not challenging enough for the student, and the kid feels frustrated saying, the problem you are giving me, I can do in my head. So I don't really get it why you are forcing me to write, because I can do it in my head. So it doesn't compute for them. And you as a parent is frustrated because you're like, I know that writing it out is better for you in the long term. So that is the impedance mismatch that is happening. Yeah, Anup, that's a great suggestion. How many ways? Yeah. There's many variants that you can build for some of these. More questions?
Hi, Ashish. I have a question.
Yes. And I think Sachin, you should probably go next, Sachin, after Amanda.
Which
Okay.
Sachin is good?
Sachin Naik.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will. Sure.
Yeah.
It'll be a long one, so be prepared.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And from a parent perspective, I know that maybe Spark can help the kids to learn how to do the problem solve. But what I'm care about is that how do I know if they really master this knowledge and they are able to move on to the next level for the men's learning. So will you provide some insights for both the parent and the kids to know? Yeah.
Yeah. So our program is grade and curriculum aligned. So we have all of the state curriculums for the US into our program, and state curriculums are by and large aligned, but slightly different. For each grade, let's say your student is in grade 3, there is a set of standards. Generally, standards are between 25 to 30 for a given grade level. And then the way we have our own proprietary mastery algorithm. we try to map, because we always ask students to go step by step. Like we don't, like even if we give an simple math question, we want them to explain, as you can
Yeah.
see in some of these UI. So they're actually going through what they are explaining and writing. So we want them to actually work through these solutions. We look at how fast the solution was arrived at. We looked at how many tries they take. We look at how many mistakes they made. Were the mistakes on this concept or for a previous year's concept? And some of these fact things go into a mastery bar. And then you can see in this is slightly occluded, but the iPad that's on the right, you see some red colored bars. So these bars map your curriculum and say what is the level of mastery a student has. Unlike school and unlike tutoring, because we are a one-on-one tutoring shop, so we don't have the same constraint of like, I need to finish this course in this time. So we will actually keep working with the student till they have mastered the concept. So for us, passing grade is not A or A minus or B. Our passing grade is 100%. So we have a pretty high bar that they need to master all of the concepts before they move forward. That is the whole reason why you want to get your kids tutored, is so that they master all of the concepts, right? Because whatever grade I'm going to give them is immaterial in real life. Like that has no meaning. What the meaning is that they actually perform better in class. Does that help, Amanda?
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
One thing that we are very conscious of, that we are solving a human problem. We are not
Yes.
solving an AI problem.
Yes.
AI is a tool if it is useful in certain areas, and we should use its capabilities where it is useful, but we should not forget that learning is a human problem.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. I
Thank
mean,
you,
not
Sachin.
only that, knowing that it is making the wrong answers, or that critical thinking is what is, you have to go back and unpeel it and say that, hey, you're not doing it right. So that takes grit. That grit is what I was looking for. I keep telling kids grit, and they don't understand it. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I know we are a little bit over time, but I'm happy to spend 5 more or 10 more minutes if there's questions that I can help answer for any of the parents. Okay, we'll also share a lot of this research. So you don't have to believe me when I talk about all of these things. These are very well researched and published in leading journals. We will share all of these links. You feel free to read through them. We read them for you because as we were building StarSpark, we wanted to be very grounded in neuroscience. So our tagline is AI plus neuroscience, because we want to make sure we understand how the brain works and how we can use AI to mimic some of these benefits or the ways humans would actually go about and teach. But if folks want to ask any more questions, I'm happy to stick around till 1:15. I'm going to be around, and thank you everybody for joining and hearing me and giving me your lunch hour. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have fun with your kids. Play some games. Make them the banker in Monopoly. That's the simplest technique you can use to get them better at math.